Okay. According to StreamYard, we are live.
We are live.
Should I hit that 30-second video again? Right now? No, I'm just kidding. That'd be crazy. Welcome to the O Bro Show, where two brothers host a podcast. On today's episode, the premiere episode, we will be discussing the controversial and yet incredibly popular figure, Jordan B. Peterson. It's a B, right? What's the B? What do you think the B is? Do we know that?
I don't
Is that
know.
public information?
It has to be his middle name, right? Wait, let me see.
Well, I want to know what is it like Jordan Bryan?
I'm looking it up.
Okay, well,
The B.
specifically, we're going to be discussing whether Jordan Peterson is wrestling with God, which is his massive lecture series that he's going on now, and is also his title for his next upcoming book. So we're going to be discussing whether he is wrestling with God like he claims to be, or if he is a wolf in sheep's clothing, a secular humanist masquerading as a theologian to deceive many. This is the topic for today, Seth. Are you ready?
I am ready. Also, I found the name. It's Burnt.
No, it ain't.
Bernt. It's a Norwegian. Oh, it's after his Norwegian great grandfather,
Jordan
Jordan
Burnt Peterson. Okay.
Yeah.
It kind of goes hard. I like it. Seth, who is Jordan Peterson to you?
Jordan Peterson is number one, he's a very educated individual. He was specifically very impactful on my life, especially in high school. He was really the first one to really push me into philosophy and politics. I think that was back in 2019 is when I first got into him. So kind of when he was going off about Canada and the University of Toronto and what was it? The one law in Canada that was trying to push for like a necessity to force certain types of speech.
Yeah.
So he was very impactful in getting me started. And then I would say that he's a great tool for conservatives and Christians, or just like people who believe in objective morality, to use against like nihilism and other forms of relativism.
Yeah. I have followed Peterson's stuff. I wouldn't say I was as maybe influenced by him as maybe you were, but I've followed, watched, consumed Peterson content. I think I've watched a couple of his lectures, but I haven't like gone through all of his lectures. I've read half of the 12 Meanings of Life, and then I got a little bored. But I did read half of his book, and I actually enjoyed his writing. I actually enjoyed his writing a little bit more than some of his speeches and stuff like that. So Peterson is incredibly influential and effective at what he does. He sells out stadiums and crowds talking about the Bible, which is, I guess, goes into part of our discussion today of how should we, as Bible-believing Christians, treat Peterson and his theology. How should we, I don't know, take seriously the claims that Peterson makes, because he's obviously influencing people using biblical language and biblical stories, but to what end, I guess, would be the question. Do you have anything you want to comment on that?
To what end we're supposed to trust him? I would say he gets a lot of questions, like he asks a lot of good questions. I think the first seeking part is pretty good, in terms of like, specifically his pushback on like nihilism and just the idea that life is meaningless. He sees the necessity for a meaning of life to live what he would probably say a good life or a meaningful life or to help people. Because if you don't see a meaning to life, then you're not going to do anything. You're not going to even get out of bed. Um, so that questioning of there needing to be a meaning to life is good. It's a good starting point. Um, but I think that where he sometimes, or I wish he would go further into the objective side of that, not just like the tool of it. Because I feel like a lot of him questioning meaning of life is just he sees that life is better lived if you believe in a meaning to life. Not that he would actually say that there objectively is one. It seems like at times. Um, so it's kind of like a utility to him more than an actual belief at times. Um,
Yeah, the Bible itself.
yeah. Or just the idea of a creator or morality even. It seems like he kind of walks that line of arguing for objective truth and morality, but then also saying, well, it's true and good because of the results, not because of the actual truth claims themselves.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I don't wanna jump the gun because we got some good clips that we're gonna go through
Yeah.
of Peterson addressing this very thing, and we can comment directly on Peterson's, talking. But yeah, I'll lay my argument out officially on, like, why I'm I don't know, not a fan of Peterson seems a little harsh, but why I
Yeah.
think it's Peterson is a little dangerous to platform. And that's essentially my argument is that Christians are platforming Peterson's theology, which I think is leading a lot of people astray and is actually more confusing towards genuine faith. I am for people discovering Christ and discovering God and the Bible even in a public setting. But there is something to be said about major Christian figures, churches, universities platforming someone who right now currently is just not following God, which goes into the first question, Seth, which is Jordan Peterson a Christian? And I think depending on who you ask, this is actually a complex question.
Hmm.
Um,
If you ask it to him,
and
it's really complex.
exactly. So I'll kick us over to the first video we're gonna watch, and this is him. This is one of his lectures where he addresses this um, forwardly of is he or does he believe in God? Um,
I don't like that question,
let me replay.
even God. And I don't like that question. And people have complained at me a lot, and I'm sure they have their reasons because they don't like my answers. And I have two answers.
We're about to do some of the complaining, Seth. I'm just letting you know. We're falling right
Mhm.
into his trap. He set us up and he's
Mhm.
gonna knock us down.
Yep.
They've kind of become stock, which is not a good thing. But they're the best approximate. I can't figure out why I don't like the question exactly. I've got three. I had three sort of burgeoning hypotheses. One was, it's none of your damn business. That's the first one. So it's like a privacy issue. Like it seemed to me to be a question.
I'm gonna be a little nitpicky on everything he says, but okay,
Go for it.
it is our issue because you made it our issue because you're publicly doing this, so that's why people are asking you. You are doing lecture series about the Bible, and you are on the Daily Wire making series through Genesis. Of course, people are going to ask you, "Do you believe in God?" If you are doing this, you are quite literally profiting off of the Bible, profiting off the biblical stories. That is what is
Hmm.
the basis of your lecture series. So of course, people are
Hmm.
going to want to know, "Hey, do you actually believe in God, or what does this actually mean to you?"
Yeah.
Um, I think that's a completely fair question if he's going to be a public figure. I would agree if he was private and somebody came up to him off the streets who was like, "Hey, do you believe in God?" Yeah, that does seem like a little bit of a private question that you might be
Yeah.
caught off guard and not have to answer directly. But
Yeah.
he's a public figure.
Yeah. You kind of, as a public figure, even us doing this, going on the internet, we are inviting people to ask us questions even on this. And so I
Yeah.
think there's like a level of like you can call it like I guess like a social contract of like, if you're going to do something in media online in the public square, you give free roam and like the right to question you on what you're going to say. It's a little, what would it be? Prideful or entitled to think that you can be so influential in the public square and go online and do lectures like you were saying, and then think that you also at the same time can just not be questioned on what you're teaching.
Yeah, they're just not asked, like, the fundamental
Yeah.
question of the Bible is, like,
Yeah.
what does that actually lead you to? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little entitled.
Question that was too private to be answered properly. And so, and you could consider that a cop-out, and maybe it is. And then another one was, well, what do you mean by believe? Like, do you mean the words? Do you mean to say the words, I believe in God? Does that indicate that you believe in God? Like, I don't know.
Before he lays this out, Seth, what do you think it means to believe in God?
I think to believe in God would be to have a high level of confidence in the idea that there is a supreme creator who created all and is wholly good. And that's just to believe in a creator. And then if you're going to believe in the Christian God, it would be those things plus the Trinity, plus Jesus coming down as the incarnation and then dying on the cross and rising again. And then through those beliefs, your actions will follow.
Yeah, I think Peterson, and well, it's not even just Peterson's problem. This is a fundamental Christian problem as well, where we confuse or we conflate belief in God with faith in God.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think Peterson does this a lot. Scripture says that the demons and devils believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have faith in God.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so we can rationally and intellectually believe in God. We believe in Him without actually putting our faith in Him. That actually forces us to action of any sort.
Sure.
And so I think
Yeah.
Peterson like comes up to that, and he can't get over that hurdle because he thinks you're asking him is your faith in Him, and so he
Mm-hmm.
addressed his response here is going to be, is his faith in God, when really they're asking, like, do you just believe that God is real and like actually real, like not just a idea or a I don't know, I'll use Peterson, like an archetype that we follow again, like he's a real thing, like a table is real, which will in the Pints with Aquinas thing he refutes that, but that's what they're asking him, and I don't think that that's confusing, but he likes to dodge around with his language,
Which,
to get
I mean,
around
I
that.
guess to be charitable to him, a lot of Christians would just conflate belief and faith, or like following Christ, like what you're saying, of like that difference of like saying like, yeah, like there probably is a creator, or Jesus was a person even, or he did rise from the dead. Like those things you can agree with.
Yeah.
And then there's the separation of, okay, well, are you going to pick up your cross and follow him, which he always will point to. Where I feel like it's probably true that a lot of Christians will just conflate those things. But then I'm going to blame him though on this too, because he will question the question without giving any definitions, where he seems to almost, he's so educated and he's been in like academia for so long, and he was literally a professor. A very simple thing that he could just do would be to define things, and he almost refuses at all times to give a definition for people to work off of, so that it leaves us in the fog.
Yeah. No, I don't think he does a good job of doing that, but I'm gonna play the clip again.
What you mean by believe exactly, because And that's got me in trouble too, because people think that attempting to clarify the meaning of words is an attempt to escape from the question, and it's actually an attempt to specify the question. I mean, is what you believe what you say, or what you act out? Now, I would say to.
I feel like even to this point, though, and I'm just a quick point here. I don't think he answers clearly either of these questions that he lays out. Any of these calls for specificity. Is it what you say or is it what you act out? I don't think he really answers any of this in a straightforward manner. So it's not even helpful. His intention to be specific, actually, I don't think ends up being that helpful.
Some degree it's both, but if push comes to shove, as far as I'm concerned, what you believe is what you act out, not what you say. And then, and if you're an integrated person, then what you act out and what you say are the same thing, and then you're a person whose word can be trusted, right? Because what you say and what you do are isomorphic, they're the same thing. But belief is instantiated in action, so I have also suggested that I act as if I believe in God, or to the best of my ability. And people aren't very happy with that either, but, and then...
Sorry, I paused it quick. I don't know if that's fully true, though. Because I feel like there's things that we can say, like, yeah, we believe this to be true, and yet there is no effect on how we live our lives. Like, I can believe that the world is a globe and it's not flat. Right. And that has no effect on my personal life at all.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that this idea that every single belief we have then must affect our lives, it's just not true. I think that he doesn't have that himself.
Yeah, and if we take Peterson's logic to, I think its logical end, then we could believe in really anything as long as we act like it. So I can believe that the world, I could believe full-heartedly and maybe even have some evidence that climate change is going to destroy the world in 50 years. And I act, so I get rid of everything. I stop driving. I blah, blah, blah. I live my life like that. I believe that, but that's not what they're actually getting at. They want to know the fact of the matter. What is actually, that's what they're asking him.
Yeah.
And not so just, not just how are you acting towards that belief, but what is, do you believe the subject of theirs, not do you believe, but in God? Like they're asking him, do you believe that God is real? I think is most of the time when they're asking him that,
but even on the climate change thing, I feel like it would be crazy. So if somebody did believe that the world was just going to end in 50 years due to climate change, which a lot of people probably do, I think that it would probably be very naive to then say, okay, well then act like that and like live like life like YOLO. Like do the stupidest of things, and if you don't do it, then you don't truly believe. I think that that's kind of stupid, because then you're able to just completely disregard an argument because their actions don't follow what you see as a necessity for that belief.
Yeah. There seems to be some sort of logical fallacy baked in there, which is like human beings, their actions justify their beliefs 1000%. Which maybe their actions justify their sincerity. I could see more arguments for that. Like they're more sincerely believing in that because they're acting like it, but it actually doesn't change any of the facts of the matter, how much you act towards a certain thing. Now we'll get into James chapter 2, because for our Christian audience, faith without works is dead is something we do have to cover here, because I think Peterson does hit at this without having any of the basis for it. So we'll get into that.
And the third is that I'm afraid that he might exist, which I think is the most comical of the three answers and perhaps the most accurate one. But then I was thinking about this today when I was thinking about what I might talk to you guys about, and I thought, well, let's go into this a little bit more. Let's say you do believe in God. say, I believe in God. It's like, okay, well, that's hypothetically pretty impressive, I would say. It's like you believe that there's a divine power that oversees everything, that is fundamentally ethical, that's watching everything you do, and you believe that. And so what effect does that have on your behavior if you believe it? Does that mean that are you all in on your beliefs? Are you sacrificing everything to this?
I think that this is all fair. And it's one of the most difficult contentions for Christians to deal with when an atheist brings this up. So I do think that this is fair. Yeah.
But I feel like it almost assumes that Christians are arguing that because of my belief in Christ, then I'm able to be fully perfect, which someone with any level of like decent theology would argue, well, no, we're told that we're going to be made perfect in heaven. Which I feel like his argument would be like, well, your actions in your life should perfectly map on to this belief in Christianity. Which the argument against that is just, well, yes, that's the goal, and yet we know that we're still broken.
Yeah, and I think, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit later too, I think this stems from Peterson just not understanding Christ and Christ's sacrifice and how Christ covers Christ covers all of the weight that is belief in God and judgment and what that would mean. Because Peterson is correct that without Christ, this is an incredibly daunting ask of people to believe in God, because you're believing in a creator of everything, a moral arbiter, a moral judge. All of these things would radically change your life if you actually believed it, like he's pointing out. So, but I think doesn't mean we're perfect, but Christians understand that Jesus covers a lot of that weight and gravity that otherwise would be devastating. If we didn't have Christ and we came to a belief in God, like imagine a scenario where Christ hasn't come yet and me and you, we're not Jewish, but we came to a belief in God. That's a terrifying reality. It is. That's just a terrifying reality without Christ. So I think that Peterson he hasn't made that connection that Christ bridges that gap. But
transcendent entity that you proclaim belief in? Have you cleansed yourself of all your sin, let's say? Are you making all the sacrifices that you need to make? Like, have you taken the mote out of your eye? No. Or are you in the same situation, let's say, that the Catholic Church seems to be in right now?
This actually gets kind of spicy.
Just out of curiosity, it's a good time to bring that up, since the Pope seems to be concerned with what's been happening with the Catholic Church, given the endless pedophilic scandals, let's say, which seem rather serious in my estimation, and might have been something that was cleaned up perhaps 100 or 1,000 years ago, and it's being taken seriously perhaps now and perhaps not, because it's not so easy to determine exactly what it would mean to take that seriously. And you might say, well, are all the people who are committing these heinous actions and then covering them up, if you ask them, well, do you believe in God? What are they going to say? Well, you'd think the answer would be yes, given that they're like priests, and yet, what's the evidence? Well, the evidence isn't exactly so clear that
it's, again, this is a valuable critique it's a contention that many atheists are going to hurl at Christians. And I think it's hard to contend with. But again, like you were saying, the logical end of what Peterson is saying is that anyone who believes in God in the way that people want Peterson to answer, the only way they'd be able to truthfully answer that is they would have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Mere statement, let's say, or the mere acting out of the ritual, let's say. And I'm not trying to denigrate the statement or the ritual, but I'm pointing out that that's no indication of you're right to say that you believe. Because you got to, and I think this is why it's bothered me to answer this question. It's like, well, what right do I have to say that, to make that claim? I believe in God. Well, what's the claim? Is that the claim that I'm a good person somehow? Because you'd think that if you believed in God, actually, like seriously, that you'd be a good person, like right now, because, well, for obvious reasons, I would think. And so if that hasn't happened in some...
I'd like to see what Peterson would say, because doesn't happen all the time, but I do think one of the most effective apologetic arguments Christians can make is not actually a philosophical one. It's just showing you people that have changed their life dramatically after having faith in God. Like the personal transformations of people that you know, people that you've heard of, that went from moral depravity to salvation in Him and have turned their life around completely, I think is an incredible testimony to. I think it's the most effective apologetics tool, is appealing to somebody's life change.
Experience.
Yeah, so Peterson is on the other end of that, where he's saying that this kind of disproves some of your belief in God. But I wonder what he's saying, like, if he were shown some crazy examples of people, I was a drug dealer on the streets and now I found God and I've turned my life around, or whatever, would this fundamentally change what he's talking about? Does that meet his standard of what he would expect a Christ follower to have? I don't know.
That's the frustrating thing for me too, is he'll use a lot of really strong language, like good and evil, or like I guess like moral depravity, or like actual true belief, and like actions following your beliefs and stuff like that. But he doesn't give the standard of which is good or evil. He just says the words, and then it's kind of just up to interpretation of like, okay, well, does it meet his standard? Yeah.
Sort of miraculous sense, so that you're the best person you could possibly imagine being on an ongoing basis, and then terrified of deviating from that path in a serious manner, then I don't see why you have the right to say that you believe in God.
Doesn't that also go directly against when Paul was saying, like, he continues to do the things that he hates and he can't do the things that he loves? What he just said at the end there, of like being the perfect person in an ongoing fashion. Like Paul directly
Paul
talks
didn't even
about
leave
that.
it the standard.
No.
Yeah. And I'm trying to decide, we can go through James 2 quick, because we won't have time to like biblically dissect this maybe the way that this passage is deserving, but I will share it because I do think Peterson hits on an important point for Christians to deal with. So James chapter 2, starting verse 14, this is faith without works. And it says, "What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him?" That sounds very Petersonian in kind of the rationale here. "If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, be warmed and filled,' without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that?" And so again, that he pretty much is echoing what Peterson is saying. "So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead." And so, how do we contend with this as Christians, Seth? This seems like this is directly echoing what Peterson was saying.
Yeah, I gotta find it quick, but there's specifically a verse that goes to my mind that kind of argues almost the opposite. I don't know it. Yeah, it's Isaiah 64:4, where it says, quote, but we are all as unclean thing, and all our righteousness are as filthy rags, and we all do fade as a leaf, and our iniquities, like the wind, have taken us away. The specific part I'm thinking of is and all our righteousness are as filthy rags, which I feel like contends with directly what this is talking about, where it's saying it's a both and. It's like, yes, you need the actions. You can't just say you have faith, because like Jordan Peterson will say, many will go to Christ at the end of the days and say, Lord, Lord. And yet Christ will turn away and say that he never knew them. But then Isaiah 64 contends with it, saying that, well, without Christ, without God, our righteousness and our acts mean nothing. They are, it's meaningless to God, because it's sinful creatures trying to act as though we aren't sinful. So I would say like you said, it's a good thing to contend with, and it's a sobering reminder, but also it's not just actions, it's actions plus faith, or it's faith and actions, or they coincide, they don't contradict.
Yeah. I would say our actions flow from our faith. And that's why I think it's important that we define terms. And biblically speaking, our faith is separate from, well, they're all flowing one and the same, but faith biblically is different than what Peterson is talking about. When somebody asks Peterson again, do you believe in God? It's more of an intellectual exercise. If they were to argue, do you have faith, or do you believe in the Christian faith, or do you have faith in God? I think that this touches really well on what Peterson's contentions really are. Like, what does it mean to have faith? And biblically speaking, we can see in James that genuine faith in Christ does impress upon a heart towards good actions. It does move us to action. Genuine faith does. Doesn't make us perfect, but whatever. But it's still, I don't know. It contends with, I think it coincides pretty well with that clip from Peterson, so I wanted to share it. Moving into, because we're still wrestling with this question. Question number 1, is Jordan Peterson a Christian? So I want to show this other clip, which is directly Peterson talking about this very question about God and belief in God.
True? Well, the Bible's a story. Is it true? Well, depends what you mean by true. And people say, well, that's Weasley. It's like, no, it's not. If you ask a profound question like that.
Is it Weasley, Seth? You're smirking.
Yeah, it's definitely Weasley. It's not Weasley because it's not Weasley in the way that he would maybe think it is, but I would argue it's Weasley because he refuses again to give a definition. He uses such, people will use words like this, like true, good, in common language. And most of the time we're able to say like, yeah, we all understand. But for whatever reason, when it comes to Jordan Peterson, or when it comes to philosophy specifically, you need to define these terms that are generally seen as simple, and he refuses to do so. That's the Weasley part. It's not just the fact that he's questioning it, it's the fact that he's questioning it and then he's not able to give any type of answer when pushed on his definition.
Yeah, and I'm fine with people wrestling with the question, is Christianity true, or is God true? But again, the way that Peterson answers this and the way he wrestles with it is he doesn't contend with the subject of that sentence. He quibbles about the terms. Well, what does truth mean? What is truth? And yada yada yada. And it does feel dodgy.
Is the Bible true? You can't assume true and then cram the Bible into that. You have to make both sides of the equation open to question. What do you mean by true? Well, you're not answering the question. No, I'm just not answering it the way you want me to. I'm not.
He just dunked on us, Seth.
He
He didn't
did.
answer the question like we want him to.
No,
He dunked
no,
on
he
us.
got us. He got us. And my question would just then be, well, give me a definition of truth and let's go from there.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Can we use the definition of truth that all like 95% of human beings would understand the definition of truth
right.
to be? I'm going to
Right.
appeal to the masses for this one.
Yeah.
This is why people like Richard Dawkins always kick the hell out of religious people when they're debating them. It's because Dawkins comes armed with a conception of the truth, and it's not trivial. It's like the scientific conception of the truth. This is a...
But that's what people are asking him, because they're asking him a truth value question.
Yeah. But also, science does not have ownership of the truth. Because inherent in that, science can't even answer that question. You can't use science to prove what is true, or you can't use science to prove that science itself is the best way to find truth. You just can't.
No.
You can get a lot of answers. Science is a very useful tool, and we've learned many things, and we will continue to learn things, but it's not the end all be all for what is truth. And so to say that Richard Dawkins thinks it is, and he does wield it like a club, but it's not. Again, the scientific consensus over truth is, I don't know. I don't even like that phrasing of that. I don't even know what that really means.
But also the way Peterson is talking, it would almost seem as though science has never been incorrect, or scientists have never been incorrect, which we know is false. We know that the consensus on certain subjects has changed years over years over years, and it continues to do so. So it's not science isn't in of itself true. It's the study to find what is. And like in a reality sense, not in a philosophical sense.
Yeah, and I just think that Peterson doesn't understand how strong the claim is that he's making, that there's a scientific consensus of the truth. Really?
Yeah.
Really? There's a scientific consensus of the truth, and Richard Dawkins is wielding it. I don't believe that. I don't think that's true. I think you'll find many disagreements among many truth statements among scientists, but could be wrong.
Big club. And before he even begins, the whole structure of the debate is predicated on the fundamental acceptance that definition of true is valid and complete. And so the religious people just lose because they're up against the might of science. It's like, how are they not going to lose that? So
Science, Seth.
Yeah,
we're up against the might of science.
Yeah, because William Lane Craig doesn't exist.
We immediately lose, Seth.
Yeah, I feel like that completely negates the the teleological argument and the cosmological argument, which both attempt to use science as a rationality to believe in like the probability of a creator. Like, it's not just on one side.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That was an interesting one for sure.
Dude, he's not even consistent though, I feel like, in this either, because he's so against like scientists who back like transgenderism. Like, he goes hard against them. So it's like, well, okay, hold up. You're saying science in this God question, but then you're completely fighting against scientists in gender and gender theory, which is fair. I'm there with him on that. It's just he's hypocritical in it because he's not consistent.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem that Richard Dawkins himself is facing now too, is that he's facing, and a lot of more of those types are facing the scientific consensus being wielded against them like a club when it comes to
Mhm.
gender issues or things like that. And so there's consensus. So this idea of, does Jordan Peterson, is he a Christian? What would you say, Seth?
I would say that he's not. I would say he's a moralist at best.
A moralist at best. You want to break that down? What does that mean?
I would say, when I say moralist, he sees that life is hard and that there's a lot of difficulty in it. And so, similar to Marcus Aurelius, he would argue that it's better to go do hard things or get up in the morning and do something beneficial to society than just stay in bed and just live in chaos. I don't think that he believes that there's any, or it doesn't seem to me, because of how much he negates these types of questions, it doesn't seem to me that he truly believes in a fundamental reasoning to do hard things because they're just objectively good, not because they're just beneficial.
Yeah.
I think he sees the benefits of morality and believing in good. Not that he thinks that they're actually intrinsically good.
Or there's any objective truth there.
Yeah.
Let's play this Peterson clip and see what we think.
God is that God isn't something you believe in. Or you could say that the way we conceptualize belief in the modern world is shallow. To believe in God is to commit your life. That's what the belief is. It isn't the statement, I believe in God. It says in the Gospels, Christ himself says, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Just because you say you believe something, it's like people say all the time that they're Christians. I'm a believing Christian. It's like, that's hard there, buddy. That's the most difficult possible commitment by definition. Because it's the hoisting of the cross, right? Really, you're going to commit to that, are you? So here's what you're committing to. Painful, unjust death, accompanied by betrayal, the perfidy of the mob, and the dominion of the tyrant. And you're going to welcome that. And that's not all, because Christ harrows hell. That's not all. That's just where it starts. Full confrontation with malevolence. You're going to commit to that.
So here's the hard thing with Peterson, is that this is so true. This clip, I don't have any. Here's where the quibbles are going to be, is that he takes this logic and then doesn't get on his knees and submit to Christ. But this clip is completely true, that many people say with their mouth and confess that, oh Lord, we need you, and then they're actually not saved. They actually don't follow Christ, or they don't commit. I like that he used that word. They don't commit to God, which I think is so true. The sad part is that Peterson misses that, Christianity and following Christ, I think, is fundamentally simple, but it's incredibly difficult. It's very simple. Like Romans 10 verse 9, it says, because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. It's as simple as that, but it's incredibly hard. You are committing a lot to that. But you have to be comfortable. And that's why that belief in Jesus is critical. And you have to start there, because to Peterson's point, that weight of that commitment is laid on Jesus's feet. It's not on us. And so it feels like a cop-out, because Jesus did bail us out. And so I don't know. I think, again, going back, Peterson's fundamental flaw is that he doesn't understand Christ's sacrifice and the meaning of it, and what that actually does for us. But in that clip, if that's all of those things that he's saying is true of the weight and gravity, but he doesn't understand, because he's I think a secular humanist, that's not for us to pick up. That's not when Scripture says bear your cross, Peterson starts with that. What does that mean for us? But bearing our cross is like recognizing that like Christ bore the cross first. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm there with you. I think he his fundamental thing is that it's an act. It's a work of picking up the cross, not that the cross is so unbearable that we need help. And I think that he also misses the point that it is so incredibly hard to believe and trust in God that it was so impossible that Christ had to go on the cross. Like that act was because it's so unbearably hard. It is impossible for us to consistently follow God. That's what sin is.
Yeah.
And that's why Jesus was needed. He bore our sin and shame. So
I think
yeah,
that's
I
the
don't know.
whole Old Testament. That's
Yeah,
all of Israel's history is showing you that human beings can't do it.
exactly.
We can't live up to the standard and belief in
Yeah.
God. And so that's why we needed Jesus.
Yeah, I think he just misses the cross. That the cross is the center point of Christianity. If the cross didn't happen, then everything, like, I mean, we're done.
Right.
Like there's
Yeah. I guess that takes us to the second question, which is, should Christians platform Peterson's theology? Seth, any first response to that? What do you think?
well, I don't even know what his theology is. I don't know if I don't even, like, I'm being fully honest. I've listened to him since for like 5 years now, maybe 6. Um, and I still have no idea what his theology really is because he's made so many different statements over the years that almost contradict each other time and time again. I really don't know where he's at in terms of theology. So I think the fact that he's so uh unsettled in his theology, I would say, like, I mean, to answer this question first, I guess, like, it probably shouldn't. You probably shouldn't. It'd be fine to have him on to talk to, I would say,
Yeah.
but to give like an actual lecture or anything in terms of teaching and advisement, um, outside of maybe like a motivational speech, I suppose, I don't think that it would be wise for Christian universities to do or Christian platforms to do.
Yeah, I would say be incredibly cautious,
Yeah.
Christians, about platforming Peterson. I'm frustrated that Christians are ceding ground to a Gnostic, I don't know, deist. Not even. I can't even say he's a deist. He's a secular humanist who sees the utility in religious stories and figures. So
Hmm.
we should not let Peterson occupy a debate stage against a Richard Dawkins and him not actually accurately present Christian arguments. Now, if you want to have Peterson debate atheists, that's fine, but understand what that is. It's two secularists debating the utility of Christian religion is essentially what the debate is. It's not
Hmm.
Peterson arguing over the truth claims in the Bible. He's arguing utility of them. And so, yeah, it is frustrating that Christians are ceding ground and not on some debate stages where Peterson is taking up space. And it's also frustrating that he is profiting to such an extent off of religious iconography in text. That's something seems a little flawed, especially if a lot of his audience are claimed to be Bible believing Christians. Something seems a little off about that for me. And especially, like we'll get into, because Peterson is incredibly confusing when he is platformed by some Christians when they ask him questions. So Pints with Aquinas, great guy. We like his podcast. I've listened to several of them. But I think he lets Peterson dance around him a little bit in this clip that we're going to show.
If I do this thing,
but here's the offer God makes Abraham.
Wait, go back.
Repeating myself, and I apologize, but it seems to me that God could not exist, and it could still be the case that I can carry my cross uphill and that be beneficial to me.
Great question. Great question.
Yeah.
A nice, straightforward question. Hey, Peterson, if what you're saying is true, I can just not believe in God at all and apply this to my life. Okay, so let's see Peterson's response to that. Pretty straightforward question. Let's see what he says.
So why not just accept that? Or why not be open to that?
Because the concept of God is something like the spirit of, what would you say, hierarchical harmony. It's something like that. This is
Was that
it's just not theology. It's just it's just not theology. It's not even close.
Yeah.
It's not he's not even talking about like an entity or like
he's not talking about he's not talking about a personal God.
No, there's no personhood to this God he's talking about. What he's talking about is like what is hard, I guess. The difficulties of life is really what he's getting at, of like
basically like the highest good that human beings can chase after and do. That meets at God is basically what he's saying. And so God is a thing to chase after, a thing to love, but it's not an actual. He's not a being. He's not a person.
Yeah, it's whatever really helps you through the mud of life.
Yeah, right. And Christians get confused because they hear that and they think, yeah, God does help me out of the mud, or God does, like, I do chase after God, and He is a model for me to base my life on. But He's not saying the same thing as you.
No.
It's a definition. So look, beneficial for you. No. It's
By beneficial, I don't mean in a cheap, quick sense. I mean, I will flourish if I do this thing.
But here's the offer God makes Abraham. Okay, so here.
I'm just. I don't know. I'm okay. I'm annoyed. I'm playing the clip.
Here's what the story signifies. Really, this is how the story lays itself out. So Abraham is a late bloomer, right? He's privileged. He's an overgrown infant. He lives in his father's tent. He's never gone anywhere. Peeled grapes appear for him magically. You know, he's got everything. He's got the socialist utopia happening. And a voice comes to him and says, get the hell away from your zone of comfort. Get out in the world. Have your adventure. Get away from your father. Get away from your tribe. Get away from your people.
Again, I don't think we played this clip, but Peterson refers to biblical stories, they're fiction. He compares them to Dostoevsky. So this is the type of truth that he's talking about, is the truth that you find in fiction, not what biblical historians and people that understand what that story in Abraham was representing. He's only contending with this as the truth you find in fiction, which you can find truth in fiction. I've read a lot of great fiction in my life, but it's different. It's different than what Bible believing Christians believe happened for like Abraham. Doesn't mean that there are examples of, I think, biblical analogies or stories or poems in the Bible. The Bible is a library of different books and genres, but the story of Abraham, to whittle it down to a fictional story, and that it's just not the. I'm appeal to the biblical consensus of that, and that's not the consensus.
Get out in the world. And Abraham says, okay. And he consecrates his adventure to God. Okay, God makes him an offer. It's a deal. Here's the deal. Now you can think about this biologically. Okay, so
again, Seth, the question was, can I believe in what you're telling me and then not believe in God at all? Or do I need any use for God to apply this to my life? And so this is all his answer to that question.
Imagine a child. A child is motivated to mature, motivated to explore the world. Why? Because the world calls to him and beckons, and the parent helps instantiate and develop conscience. And so the child is pulled out into the world, regulated by conscience, and called forward by the manifestation of meaning. That is a representation of the spirit.
What does that even mean when he says that? Like, genuine question. When he says the manifestation of meaning, what he I have such a hard time because I want to believe that he's getting at something really meaningful. I do. I really do. And I think that he is. But he uses language in a way to fog it up so much that it's like anybody can interpret what he's saying. So nobody really knows what he is saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a real answer to whatever he just said.
That impels him towards development. Same thing in adulthood. Abraham decides he's going to live by the calling of that spirit. That's his decision. Okay, so what's the offer? Follow the pathway of adventure. You'll be a blessing to yourself. That's a good deal. Are you a blessing to yourself? No, I'm addicted to pornography. It's like, time for a better adventure there, young man.
Yeah.
Right. You'll be a blessing to yourself. You'll earn a well-deserved reputation. That's a good deal.
Yeah.
That's a good deal.
Again, for the Christians potentially listening, Peterson's theology is that God is completely self-serving. That is the God that he believes in, that God is completely self-serving. This is not, we need to be very careful when we're platforming this type of theology to our audience of millions of potentially Christians that have not well thought out their religious beliefs.
That's the place you store the treasure that you store up in heaven, right? That's in the reputation that you have for ethical action with others. There's no better place to store your treasure than that, right? That's the basis of communal existence. Your reputation will grow deservedly. You'll establish something.
I always wonder, do you think he's just like making this up on the fly? It is impressive how he weaves words together to seem like he's, again, like you said, like it seems like he's really saying something. He's really spitting right now.
Yeah.
But like, I'm wondering if he's just coming up with this on the fly.
I don't think he's coming up with that on the fly. I think I wonder if he has like a memorized like dictionary of words that he uses whenever he talks in spiritual talk.
It's just a dartboard. He's
Yeah,
like, oh,
so
I'll
it's
take
just-
this one.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I
The
use
spirit of adventure.
the manifestation of meaning. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Permanent. In Abraham's case, it's a long-lasting dynasty, right? He'll be the father of nations. Why? Because he treads the appropriate path of the pattern of fatherhood that best ensures the flourishing of multiple generations. And he does that by abiding by the pathway of adventure. They're the same thing. And we would.
So in actuality, Abraham was given a commandment, he followed it, and through his obedience was blessed by God. But this was through God. It's like it's not the Bible is not meant to be read like a self-help book.
Think, well, if a child fully followed the instinct that guides him to maturation, would he not become the best of all possible fathers? And would that not be the proper pathway for establishing a dynastic legacy as a mentor and as an actual father? Right. That's not the selfish gene.
No,
really. It's seriously not. You'll do it in a way that'll be a blessing to everyone else. Okay, so
You think he completely gets rid of like the book of Job? You think he just like
No, I mean, that's probably one of, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on this. I haven't settled because Job, when I read it, that doesn't seem like a historical retelling. Maybe it is, I haven't settled on this, but that's one of the ones that seems very like Peterson could read and apply to human beings. It'd be hard. Like, what are the messaging of that? But that one, in terms of scriptural, how do we take Job?
But it would go against completely what he's talking about, though, because the point of
Yeah,
Job is to say, hey, even if you do all these actions, you're still going to be tested. His entire point here is, well, if you follow God, if you follow this adventure, this calling, you will just be blessed. It is the good
yeah.
life to follow adventure and to follow this hierarchy that
Well, I can try to Petersonian Job. He'd probably say something like, even though your life is good and your life is going great, you were not promised certain things. And life is cruel, life is hard, life will take things away from you. And when they do, you are not called to shrivel up and die, you are called to more life, and then you will be rewarded. That was pretty good Petersonian reading of Job. Where like that's how he would probably make it all about the self. Is my guess.
probably he actually
Fourth,
has talked about the book of Job. There's a small clip.
Yeah, we'll finish this clip too.
things all stacked on top of each other. Adventure, okay. True adventure. You'll be a blessing to yourself. Your reputation will grow, and rightfully so. You'll establish something permanent and long-lasting that echoes down the generations, and it'll be good for everyone. Okay, there's a harmony about all that, right? There's a stacked harmony. Okay, the spirit of that harmony, that's God. It's a definition.
Okay.
It's a definition. See,
I love Pines with Aquinas' responses and answers. Okay.
Yeah, there's no pushback. Like,
I
don't know how
I think he's lost. I don't think he's tracking with what Peterson is saying in real time. Which, in honesty, I wouldn't either. If I was across the table, I'd be like, "Yeah, dude, that sounds great." But like, listening to this back, Peterson doesn't answer his question at all.
No, because he just changes it into like a goal instead of a person.
Yeah. And his question was, why can't I follow this and apply this without believing in any? Why do I have to believe in any of those other things? And he doesn't. Yeah, Peterson dodges and dodges around it. So I wanted to show another verse that I think to this question of should Christians platform Peterson's theology. There's an important verse, which is Romans chapter 16, verses 17 through 18, which says, I appeal to you, brothers, to watch out for those who cause divisions and create obstacles contrary to the doctrine that you have been taught. Avoid them. For such persons do not serve our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own appetites. And by smooth talk and flattery, they deceive the hearts of the naive. I think Peterson is deceiving many people with smooth talk and flattery who are naive in their faith. And in context, this verse is talking about a different theology that was plaguing the Romans that was not true. But I think we can equally apply this verse to Peterson's theology for today. Peterson has a false theology and doctrine that is teaching to many people that is deceiving many that are naive. And in that case, I do think we have to be super selective and careful about platforming Peterson's theology. And if we are going to platform him, because I do like the conversations, if we are going to platform him, we need to provide adequate pushback. When Pints with Aquinas asks a question, can I follow this and not believe in Jesus? He shouldn't just let him walk through that. He should say, well, you didn't actually answer my question.
Yeah, I think a lot of Christians, they miss the idea of questioning, and they think it's rude to push people on their beliefs or like their answers, especially when it's
Paul
like
didn't
their
think so.
answers are just, huh?
Paul didn't think so. Paul came
No,
with
but
some
yeah, but
heaters.
Paul was based. But like a lot of Christians now, which is super confusing with Pints with Aquinas because he pushed back on Dennis Prager pretty hard. And Prager is closer. I would
Right.
say Prager is closer to Christ than Peterson is, because at least Prager thinks that God is an actual like person.
Right.
And it's like I don't know if it's because of how Peterson reacts or whatever, or the idea of like of like the danger of pissing him off. But so many people they let him go and they think that, oh well, to question his answer further would be rude because you're saying it's inadequate, which it is. It is just an inadequate answer. He didn't answer the question.
Yeah. And again, this is different. Like if you were coming on Peterson's show or if you were on a separate thing, blah, 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 you're inviting Peterson into your Christian audience. This is like in context. And I don't even know if this has probably happened, but I've seen Liberty University platform Peterson for the students. You have to understand he's preaching a false gospel. That is just what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get around that. You are platforming by definition, a false teacher to your Christian audience. You have to navigate these conversations with care and provide adequate pushback because you're going to deceive the naive.
Yeah, I don't know why Christian universities and even people like Pints with Aquinas are platforming him so much when there's people like William Lane Craig who you could have come talk, who does argue for the gospel directly.
Yeah.
Even if there's certain things that you disagree with him on, like and it is a belief in evolution. Well, Peterson believes in evolution to a greater extent because he doesn't even believe that God started it.
Right. Yeah.
Craig at least would argue that.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's a clout thing, right? Peterson is clout. And I'm not saying you have to disassociate from Peterson as a whole.
No.
But if you're having him on to a theological show, which Pints with Aquinas is, you're going to have a theological discussion. It should be formed as a debate because he doesn't agree with you. He's not on your side. Even though you are attacking the same people, maybe on the left, he's not on your side.
Mm-mm.
He's infiltrated the ranks. He's infiltrated the ranks, boys.
It's like a weird political thing, I think, with a lot of people, with Liberty and Aquinas here. It's like the no enemies to the right idea.
Yeah. Well, it's because he's conservative, or he's tacitly aligned with conservatives. Yeah. The enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend. And Christians need to understand that. They need to understand that.
Yeah, like there's no accountability being held. No one's like it's actually, if you think about it more fundamentally, it's truly sad because people like Pints with Aquinas here, or whoever's talking to him at Liberty University, they know he doesn't believe in Christ, and yet they're not pushing back at him to really argue for Christ. Like they know that if Peterson stays where he is, we know what God will say to him at the end.
Yeah.
And no one's truly loving him enough to tell him, it seems.
Yeah. And then when they do, he gets mad. But
yeah, right.
What do you mean by belief?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. It's Christians need to be way more careful when they're platforming this type of theology, is my opinion. So I would say no. In certain circumstances, I could say, yes, you can platform him, but you have to be pushing back. This needs to be a debate. If you're bringing him up to talk about theology, if you're coming on to his series in Genesis or whatever, you need to stand on business a little bit. Christians are a little bit scared to stand on business when it comes to Peterson because he's a huge figure. He's incredibly smart and eloquent with his words. But you have to stand on business a little bit with what you believe in. Or if we can't do it with Peterson, how are you going to go to an atheist and say anything? Because Peterson's kind of friendly to Christianity. If you can't push back on Peterson, you're not going to push back down an atheist. Or maybe it's easier to push back on an atheist because you at least know that they're against you. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no bridge to be had.
Exactly. Yeah. Alex O'Connor, friend of the stream. Not really. Hopefully friend of the
He
stream.
will be.
Future friend of the stream. He's a popular atheist YouTuber but is actually incredibly fair with his interviews
Mhm.
and his analysis of Christianity. He talked to Jordan Peterson, and finally, it took an atheist to get Peterson to answer some good questions about Christianity and religion. And so I think we should just watch this whole clip. So this is Alex O'Connor. He asks him, "Are you a Gnostic heretic? So would you be a heretic because you don't believe in the divinity of Christ or whatever?" And we'll see Peterson's answer to this.
In the early church, there was a debate around the physicality of Jesus' resurrection.
Yes.
So the canonical tradition ends up stipulating that Jesus physically resurrects,
Yes.
and you must believe that, otherwise
Yes.
you're a heretic.
Yeah, and that's part of the Catholic particular emphasis on the divinity of the body, which has a real wisdom
Yes.
rather than a disembodied soul.
You
right?
also have like the Gnostic tradition, broadly speaking, the Gnostic tradition in early Christianity that's so popular that Valentinus nearly becomes the Bishop of Rome. He's nearly the Pope.
Yeah.
You know? And there's I talked about this the other day, and I should have looked it up. I can't remember which church father it was that was telling the church community, the early church community, when you go to a new place, don't ask to be taken to the Christian church. Ask to be taken to the Catholic church, because otherwise you might end up in a Gnostic church.
Mhm.
It was so popular.
Right.
You might know more than I do, Seth, about the history between Gnosticism and Catholicism, but it was a big challenge for the early church.
Yeah.
I think that was mainly what the people falsely believe that the Nicene Creed. What is the creed? Not the Nicene Creed.
No,
What
the
is
Nicene
the
Creed is based-
what is the group? What is the group that gathered where everyone thinks they picked the books of the Bible? They always lie about that. Okay, whatever. My brain is forgetting it. And you're not helping me.
No, that's like I'm lost on what you're talking about. I haven't heard this before.
Okay, well, people think that a group of Christians who decided
Oh, you're talking. You're talking
biblical canon.
Word
I just need the
of nice.
Council of Nicaea is what
Yeah.
what people
that's what you're talking
think
about.
decided the biblical canon. That's false. It's a myth. It's not true. That people think that, and it's an often it's a lie that people have told that gets rephrased several times. But basically what I'm trying to say is that Council of Nicaea didn't actually talk about the biblical canon. What they talked was this issue is from my brief reading on it, is they talked about, like, is the bodily resurrection of Christ true?
Yep.
Do we believe in that? So they kind of
Yeah,
settled that issue.
Yeah. Which I think there were some Gnostic gospels which had to do with that, but those gospels argued that the bodily resurrection didn't happen.
Right.
So there's a fundamental argument being had.
Right.
Right.
And a lot of the Gnostic tradition says that the thing that's being gotten wrong is the idea that there was this literal resurrection.
Right.
No, the kingdom of God is here and now. The resurrection is inside of you, and you attain it through gnosis. I mean, the Gospel of Thomas, which is probably the most famous non-canonical gospel, and could have been written at the same time as like the Gospel of John. This is an early text. Doesn't even mention the resurrection. Doesn't mention a crucifixion. It's a list.
That would be interesting. That should be an interesting stream in the future. Us reading through the Gospel of
Thomas.
The Gospel of Thomas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's crazy. But
from my knowledge, though, like, I think a lot of the Gnostic gospels have been disproven.
Yeah, disproven and debunked. Yeah. No, I agree. But it just would be interesting to see, like, how do you, what would even be the value of, I don't know. I think all of the gospels hinge on Christ's death and resurrection, but
it's a list of sayings.
Yeah.
And the very form of that book, as one scholar whose name I've forgotten, unfortunately, has pointed out, of that collection shows that these people believed that the thing that's important is not what Jesus did, but what he said. The thing that's important is the knowledge. The thing that's important,
Yeah, right.
And so this resurrection stuff sort of doesn't matter. Now the thing is, in that early church community,
no free ads,
dude.
Take it off and play it.
I'll skip
No
it.
free ads.
I was just about to pause it anyway on what Alex is saying, and saying Paul would like to have a word about the resurrection not having any point.
Yeah.
Paul would definitely like to have a word. We what verse was it? It's 1 Corinthians 15. Paul repeats himself twice in two verses, 1 Corinthians 15:14 and 1 Corinthians 15:17, where Paul says, "And if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain and your faith is in vain." And then also in verse 17, "And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile and you are still in your sins." And so obviously, I think this is why the Council of Nicaea and the early church were like, this all disagrees with what Paul was saying. We should probably throw out this gospel because it refutes a core tenet and teaching of Christianity, which is the bodily resurrection matters.
Dead. Well, this question of like the resurrection as a physical, historical event, that you're kind of missing the point. The thing that matters is like, the resurrection that takes place inside of every person.
Yeah.
It sort of sounds a little bit like the kind of approach that you would take. Now, if that's true, that would mean that in the early church, you'd have been condemned as a heretic. So
that's just a crazy statement.
Yeah. He just agreed with it. He said,
yeah,
I'm a heretic.
When a modern Catholic says to you, Jordan Peterson, are you a Christian? What do you think about Catholicism? I think that the reason that they're interested is because if it's true what I'm saying, then they would have to say, I suppose, at least according to my understanding of Catholicism,
that's a form of Gnosticism.
I can't count you among my number. And so I think that's probably why people are interested. And I wonder if you agree.
Well, what would you say? That would constitute a genuine form of inquiry, for sure.
And I wonder if you feel like you're, I don't know.
See, one of the things I really like about the bodily.
The Peterson lean, bro. That's how you know it's going down. It's getting serious. When he leans forward, he's dialed.
He locks in. He's dialed.
The tradition of the resurrection is that what it does that's so remarkable is that it doesn't.
I'm not even paying attention to what he's saying. Have you noticed his suit jacket? I just looked at it.
Oh, it's a bunch of.
It's crazy. That's a bunch of saints and Catholic iconography. That's just a crazy suit jacket.
Desacralize the body. And that's very, very important. I think the fundamental problem with Gnosticism is that it becomes it's very easy for it to become a.
He does look half hard drip though. His suit coats do go hard.
Sometimes,
he probably has
this thing's ugly.
This one does not. This one doesn't. But he has one.
This thing looks like one of those.
Dude,
one of those.
Go.
What'd you say?
What were you saying?
I was gonna say that this suit looks like one of those cheap prints you get at Walmart.
Yeah, it does. But have you seen his one where it's half blue and half red? A split.
Yeah. His Joker coats.
That one is tough.
His Joker suit coats. Yeah. Yeah. He's definitely got a stylist for sure.
Yeah.
Doctrine that's contemptuous of the body and contemptuous of the material world.
A great deal of the Gnostic tradition literally believes that the material world is created by an evil demiurge.
Right, exactly. Right? Well, exactly.
And Jesus comes to save us from that.
The insistence on the bodily resurrection is a medication against that. And it's an effective one.
I would really love to ask about Genesis. This might be a bit of a tangent, and tell me if it's uninteresting to you, but there's one Gnostic text called the Testimony of Truth that was discovered in the Nag Hammadi library. And this is buried probably around 300 AD. So it must be earlier than that. It's a fairly early text. And this text identifies the serpent in the Garden of Eden with Christ.
Is the serpent, Seth, in Genesis, is that Jesus?
No, that's not Jesus. that ain't him, dude.
Well, one Gnostic text says so. So You never know.
I do find that funny. I find that funny how oh, it's weird. Trent Horn has pointed this out before. It's a little hypocritical of atheists to point to Gnostic texts and then to say that those are informative,
Yeah.
and then to look at the Bible, which is in of itself like a library of books. Like you said earlier, it's not just a singular book; it is many books over years and years. But to say that none of them can be informative.
Yeah. Well, it's because they appeal to the idea that the Bible was arbitrarily picked, tossed together. There's so many contradictions within the Bible itself, and so appealing to a Gnostic tradition is just another contradiction, and it's blah blah blah. They're all just books at the end of the day. When really, I would say the Bible is pretty seamless in. It's like the Bible makes sense when you read it.
It quotes itself over and over and over again. Like different books quote each other again and again and again. And then you got the argument that Jesus fulfilled a ton of Old Testament prophecy as well.
Right.
And this is fascinating to me because when I read
as a leader to illumination.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. Now,
when I read tradition that makes the serpent a higher god than the original God because he's the agent that calls to conscience.
Yeah. Now, of course, the serpent. Yes. Now, the serpent is never identified as Satan or the devil, except by Christian tradition. It's just the serpent. Now, there's so much interesting about this. When I first read the Genesis, when I read,
even the classic Christians often regarded the fall as the, what would you say, fateful but heaven-sent error that made the incarnation of Christ both possible and necessary.
Sure. So,
right? So there's it's very interesting because there's a gloss on that where...
Any comment on that, Seth? I think he's probably right. It just in context, this seems a little out of order, but he's hitting on a true statement where the fall was necessary in order to bring Jesus. Like God had a plan for salvation from the very start. So that's what he's kind of talking about.
Well, yeah, but like I feel like it almost sounds like he's saying the fall was a good thing to happen, which I mean, I don't think that we would say that it was, because the fall is due to the failure of humanity. It's not that. It's not that God caused Adam and Eve to sin. It's that they chose out of their own will to do so.
Right.
And so the cross was a necessity.
But I think God's ultimate plan for humanity from the start was to have a redeemed, saved people through Jesus.
Well, yeah, because like he would have known that it was going to happen.
Jesus was never like a oh crap fallback plan.
No.
Jesus was behind creation. He was the center of it all from the beginning.
Where even in traditional Christianity, the
it gives you Christ.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. It gives you Christ. And Jesus at one point compares himself to a serpent in the Gospel of John, early in
oh, yes.
He'll raise himself up,
lifted up.
Like Moses lifts up the serpent.
Insanely profound. See, that's one of the passages, actually. Sorry, I don't want to derail you from...
I'm skipping ahead. That's
fine. He does interrupt a lot, too. He kind of just goes on and on.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk because I wanted to get Peterson's like final word on the resurrection, which basically,
do you have the clip
believes in its utility.
Well, do you have the clip of him saying that if he took a camera back in time and if he took a photo, that he would probably believe that he would see Christ walking out of the tomb? Have you seen that clip?
I have seen the clip.
Because Alex, that's probably the best question. That's probably the best question Alex asked that entire interview, and it's because Alex is a great interviewer. But he finally got Peterson to just give a straightforward answer because he gave him no other. Like, there's no way around it, because he said, only in a material sense do you think that if you took a Polaroid back in time and you took a photo, do you think that you'd see an empty tomb?
Right. Yeah, he says, I'm pulling it up now. He said, I would suspect yes.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah. Yeah, I'll play that one because that one is good. All right, let me get that one. And then it's probably the last one for this first episode of the Obro Show. Good episode all around. Did Jesus actually exit his tomb? Friend of the stream, Alex O'Connor.
he's a big fan of ours.
Big fan of ours. Oh, I muted it. Sorry. The ops messed me up.
I have no dog in this fight. I'm not a Christian.
Yeah.
But I know that a lot of Christians are frustrated when they begin asking about Jesus, who's a much more physical entity. Right? It's a real human being. It's someone of flesh and blood. It's someone who's physically crucified by the
It's a
Romans.
very different question. It's very different question.
And then
Sorry. It's like, I'm just imagining Christians like, do you believe in Jesus? And what he did? And he's like, that's a different question.
is seen as a physical entity, at least according to the canonical tradition, by his disciples after he died.
Yeah.
So when somebody asks you, do you believe that happened? And when I've seen you asked about that question, you tend to still speak in terms of the psychological and the mythological. I think the frustration is that, as you've just said, these are
I
two
don't
different
mind
conversations,
frustrating
right?
Christians in that regard either, because the truth of the matter is, with regard to the gospel accounts, that the mythological and the historical are inextricably cross-contaminated.
Sure.
There's no.
I think his point here with the mythological and the historical is that all of the gospel accounts of miracles and spiritual things, Peterson is going to appeal to that's Bible using fictional truth. So he doesn't think any of that actually historically happened, which is, again, it's a weird claim if you think the Bible or the Gospels have some historicity to them. That seem like they contradict each other, because if you believe in the historicity of the Gospels, then why would all of a sudden randomly from one sentence to another go to fictional? It's I don't know. I think it's a little silly reading of the Gospels.
I think it's also a little weird how he almost at the start there with that follow-up question of like how Christians ask him and how it frustrates them, he almost seems to like weaponize it a little bit of like he's fine pissing off Christians, but in reality it's not Christians who are the most frustrated with him. It's actually, I would say, atheists who are getting the most frustrated with him, because they see, dude, you believe the same thing as me, and yet you're arguing for Christianity.
Yeah, I see it on both sides. It's both. It's people that want to know what is true, and you get that on both ends. So you have people like us, and then you have people like Alex O'Connor that are just like, hey, what do you actually believe happened? And then Peterson gets dodgy.
There's no pulling out the historical Jesus, right? That's a non-starter. And why that is, I don't know. It's very mysterious. It's very hard to understand, as are the, let's say, the accounts of the resurrection. Okay, so what do I think about that? Well, I think that denying the historical reality of Christ I think that's just a fool's errand.
Of course.
I don't know why anybody would bother with it.
So a man exists called Jesus. We have that much.
Now, there's a claim that is attributed to Christ that he is the embodiment or the incarnation, the fulfillment, let's say, of the prophet and the laws.
Yes.
I think that's true. Yeah. What does that mean? Well, I think it's in the Gospel of John. I think Gospel of John closes with a statement that's something like, if all the books that were ever written were written about the gospel accounts, that wouldn't be enough books to explain what had happened.
Yeah, if all the things that Jesus did.
Yeah. And there's a truth in that. The truth is that profound religious account is bottomless. And the biblical representations are like that. There's no limit to the amount of investigation they can bear, not least because the text itself is deeply cross-referenced. So there's an innumerable number of paths through it. It's like a chessboard. And so it's inexhaustible in its interpretive space.
That's true.
And that's a problem.
Do you think no one has figured out the Bible, Seth?
I think no one has figured out the Bible.
Yeah, that's essentially what he's saying. Is it's like it's indecipherable. You can't. It's a hodgepodge. It's a chessboard. It's just a mixed
Yeah,
bag.
no, I think like we've pointed to Paul already, I think Paul would probably disagree.
And I just think that there's so many other scholars today
who would
that are way
disagree.
more well-read and educated on the
Uh-huh.
Bible than you and I, and way
Mhm.
more well-read than Peterson, that
Yep.
instead of Peterson defending Christianity. So that again, it goes back to, it's just frustrating.
Problem too, because it means it's also susceptible to multiple interpretations, including potentially competing interpretations.
I think a lot of people interpret Paul, for example, the earliest New Testament source, as saying that if Jesus did not literally rise from the dead, if there was not a man who stopped breathing and then started breathing again, then your faith is futile and you're still in your sins. That is
That's 1 Corinthians 15. That's what we just talked about.
Christianity is undermined. Now, that means that, and Paul doesn't say sort of believing that that's false is really bad. He says, if you do not believe this proactively, then your faith is futile.
The problem I have with that.
If you don't proactively believe that yourself, then I think when a Christian asks you, do you believe in the resurrection of Jesus? Are you a Christian? I think
Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
you must be committed to saying no, at least under that interpretation of Paul. And even if you're not sure, I mean, it's fine if I say to you, do you think that a man physically rose from the dead? And you say something like, well, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there, but I think it has a lot of mythological significance, or I think that maybe it happened in a different sense, or it happened in the sense that good fiction happens, fine. But it needs to begin with that caveat of the simple sort of, historically speaking, I don't know. And I know you don't like to pull out the historical Jesus
that's a good objection.
But it's an important question to ask.
No, of course, it's a very good objection. So I just did a seminar on the Gospels with a crew of about 8 people, and it was the same crew that walked through Exodus with me with a couple of variations. And
I don't think that's been released yet, but Peterson, I guess, did the series on the Gospels. So we'll get to see him walking through the Gospels in a similar fashion.
I spent a lot of time on the resurrection.
Yeah, I don't know how helpful it will be.
I'm not sure.
Accounts, for example. And of course, that was the toughest, let's say, that was the toughest morsel to chew and digest. The thing about the resurrection accounts is that they're all, look, so I could say something like this, which will just annoy people, but it doesn't matter. I believe the accounts, but I have no idea what they mean.
That's it's on its own, it's not crazy, but just coming from him, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
I believe the gospel accounts. I don't know what they mean.
I don't understand them, but I believe in them.
Anybody who's hearing that, and I think Alex Connors can cover this, anybody who's hears that you believe the gospel accounts, what do you mean you don't know what that means? If you believe them, if you believe what the apostles were saying in the accounts, then you're a Christian. the gospels are they're radical claims that Jesus came, he did a bunch of miracles, crazy things, he died and rose again. If you believe that, then of course, like, you have some meaning there. It's annoying. But that's because, and then he's gonna be like, well, what do you mean by believe?
Yep.
When I say I believe the gospels, it means I live them out. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
When you say you believe the accounts, do you mean, and I hate to be sort of pedantic here, it seems pedantic, but do you mean you believe that these are things that happened, such that that's a strange
thing.
I know you don't like that. Let me put it this way. If I went back in time with a Panasonic video camera and put that camera in front of the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, would the little LCD screen show a man walk out of that tomb?
This is a great question. I'm wondering if Alex prepared this question to ask him, because that's, you can't, how do you dodge around that? That's what he wants to know.
I would suspect yes.
So that to me seems like a belief in the historical event of the resurrection, or at least of Jesus leaving the tomb, which means that when somebody says, do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead? It doesn't seem clear to me why you're not able to just say, it would seem to me yes.
Because I have no idea what that means.
Well, so it's brain breaking, bro, because with that answer, then he's way more closer to Christianity than all of the other previous clips. But because he was so dodgy and so vague, it took us actually getting him here to say, like, I would suspect yes. That's an okay statement. That's a faith statement.
Yep.
Like, if I were to whittle down my belief or my faith, I can't 1000% prove that Jesus walked out of the tomb. I would suspect yes from the evidence I've seen. That's faith. That's a faith statement. So he's there, but then he just doesn't know what that means.
He just walks it back because he doesn't want to. I think like that short of him talking about commitment is him talking about himself a little bit, because I think that he probably, like he just said, he does suspect that Jesus did walk out of the tomb, and yet he refuses to commit to what that calls him to do.
What does that mean for him?
Yeah, the calling. Yeah. So I think like what you're talking about, like with like believe, like in an intellectual sense versus faith, he does believe in Jesus. He does believe in the resurrection, it seems, with that answer.
You would think like that,
But he doesn't have
it's
faith.
still so vague. Yeah, it's still so vague. He doesn't have faith, and then his belief in Jesus, I still don't know if it is an intellectual exercise for him, if it's a genuine faith and belief that this happened. I don't know. I don't think we'll ever know, which is why, I don't know, is Jordan Peterson wrestling with God or a wolf in sheep's clothing? I would say for now, he is a wolf in sheep's clothing, that Christians are willfully letting him into their circles, their homes, to infiltrate also Christian speak.
Yeah. I think it's a little too ironic that as he is having these interviews and these discussions and everything, he's coming out with a book called, I think, We Who Wrestle with God. It's just a little, I don't know, it seems to be he's gonna make a huge profit off of it.
A ton of money. And most of the people that are going to buy this book are going to be self-professed biblical Christians. I'm going to go on a limb and say that the most people that are going to buy this book are going to be self-professed Christians. That seems a little wrong.
Yeah.
You can read what you want. I might read it. It seems interesting. Yeah.
But just him writing it, like the intention there is like, okay, well, like you're writing this book, but you're going on tour and you're having all these interviews and you're giving like, is it like, I don't know. It's like, if you can't even answer it in an interview or in a lecture, what are you going to do in your book other than just reword exactly what you've been saying?
It's going to be all of this. Yeah. With just more text. Yeah. I don't think we'll get any real answers, which is why I would advise Christians just be cautious. Be cautious with Jordan Peterson's consumption for his theology. Be cautious with platforming him, and be willing to stand on business a little bit. I don't like the rise of cultural Christianity. You have Jordan Peterson, you have Russell Brand, and people of these natures that are exploring Christianity in a very cultural sense, because they like what Christianity has given society, but then they don't believe in any of the truth claims of Christianity. I think that there's a flaw there, but maybe we'll be able to explore that a little bit deeper in a future episode. This has been a good episode, the first episode of the Obro Show. Any last parting statements you want to give the audience, Seth?
smash that like button and subscribe. No, but I think it's good to question what you believe. It's good to question what you follow and why you do what you do. It's bad to intentionally continue to not give an answer to those things. If you say I don't know, then that's fine. It's a lot of atheists. It's just I don't know. It's fine. But then don't just question words without giving a definition. You have to eventually come to a conclusion, even if that is just I don't know. And Peterson refuses to do so. And so
Yeah.
don't do that.
Yep. That's good. I don't have much else to say. Thank you for watching. You're probably here, hopefully, if you're watching this from a YouTube video or short and have redirected to the live. We're hoping to do bi-weekly Saturday morning streams where we get on. Hopefully, when we have an audience, we can chat with some of y'all. But yeah, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll be interacting with all of you, and we want to hear your opinion. Is Jordan Peterson a useful tool for Christians? Is he a Christian? Is he wrestling with God? Or is he a little bit more dangerous for Christianity today? And should we be more cautious with how we approach his theology? Thank you for joining, and we'll see you all next time. This has been the Obro Show with the two Obros leading a show that's a podcast show. Thank you.
Yep.
Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.